welcome to Bob's Bulletin. Today's top story, are you ready, kids? So who lives in a pineapple under the sea? That's right, Spongebob Squarepants. And it's been 20 years since the first episode of Spongebob Squarepants was released. Now, it was released on May 1st of 1999, so I'm a little bit late, but since I do TV shows on Thursdays and I was sick last Thursday, I figured I'd get to it now. It has been 20 years, hard to believe that it's been around that long, 12 seasons. So it's kind of insane since, you know, it started as such a small thing. You know, Steven Hillenburg, he passed away this year, so it's so sad that he didn't get to see the 20th year anniversary. But he's the creator, and he created it just as a project since he was a marine biologist. And it just, it originally wanted to be an adult cartoon, and of course how things have to change so you can get the production. It became what we know as SpongeBob SquarePants. And it's just lived out, and kids everywhere enjoy it, whether they were kids when it first started to kids now still enjoy it. Adults enjoy it, especially the adults that grew up with it. Personally, I love it. I've probably seen every episode that there has been, at least once, if not, 3 or 4 times I've seen the movies. It's such a great show. And it's hard to believe that it's come this far. Like, you just see, if you don't know what it is, which I know all of you have seen it, but it's basically just about a sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea and works at a fast food restaurant. And that's pretty much the premise of the story. And it's basically about how him and his friends just go throughout their daily lives. He has 2 neighbors, Squidward and Patrick. Patrick's his best friend. And they also have, Mr. Krabs that he works for, and then Sandy, who is a squirrel that lives in an undersea dome, and she's kind of the smart scientist of the bunch. But it's just about their lives, like what they do, what he gets into on a day-to-day basis. It talks about some of his hobbies, such as like jellyfishing, or, his true passion for being the best fry cook. So that's really all there is, and it's lasted 12 years just because he's such an enjoyable character, because they don't put an age on SpongeBob. Like, he's not 10, he's not 40, he's not 15, he's kind of age neutral. So everyone can see that even though he has a job, he's still a kid at heart. Or even though he's kiddish, he can be mature at times. I mean, it's just, he makes mistakes and he learns from them sometimes, and he tries to grow from them. And it's one of those stories that they don't necessarily, a lot of kid shows and a lot of cartoons are about putting like subliminal messages in them. I think that's the right word. About how you should not smoke, or how not to do drugs, or don't steal, or something like that. And SpongeBob doesn't really do that. I know there's a couple moments where they do, but it's more of just an enjoyable show. It's back to like the old cartoons. They didn't really need a reason to make it. They just wanted it to be enjoyable, and they wanted kids to love it. And that's where SpongeBob comes over. And I mean, especially with the internet getting real popular with the memes, because SpongeBob has so many. Just Google SpongeBob memes and you'll see how many memes this great show has, just because it's so funny. There's things in SpongeBob that you could say and everyone around you would, especially everyone from the 90s and the early 2000s that were children in the 90s and the early 2000s, they would get the meme, they would get the joke easily, something like, Pinky out, just for for one of the first episodes. So in the show, it has created this culture behind it. The new movie just came out. I'm not reviewing the movies here, but the new movie just came out just to show you how much there's still love and passion for the show. And as we as adults that were children in the early thousands, so we really got to experience it first. Well, now, a lot of us have kids that are watching it now, and it's just one of those classics I think I would put up there, and I know some of y'all are going to hate this, but with stuff like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse and The Thing, or even, something like Yogi Bear. And the reason is because its ability to survive time. There's nothing that really, it doesn't really do jokes or something that will make it stay to that time period. It should be able to last throughout. For instance, like Bugs Bunny, some of his jokes where he puts his finger in the end of the shotgun blows up. Well, that's going to be funny in the 1960s, but it's also going to be funny in 2020s and 2030s, 2040s. It's just humor like that that's going to remain funny throughout. That's what Bugs Bunny did. That's what even some of the early Mickey Mouse did. They just had this humor that you didn't have to be from that time period to laugh at it. Whereas with SpongeBob, it's the same way. You don't have to be in the 90s and the early thousands to enjoy it. It's enjoyable, it's funny, it's great. It's just an overall good show. It's funny, you're gonna laugh. I think I've said it's funny about 25 times, but that should just show you how almost every episode it's enjoyable. So the animation style of it, just to touch on that a little bit, it is a TV animation, so you know they don't have as much funding as the movies or as some of the big works, you know, but it's still good. It's 2D animation, flat animation, hand drawn. In the early episodes they did do a static background, and that means, if you don't know, that means the background is always made. It's always the same, it doesn't change, and the characters move and the background stays the same. It's easier to animate, cheaper, and quicker to do than the other, where you have the moving background, so the background changes as the characters move. A little bit harder. There's also one where the background's like on a loop, and say they're like running through the plains or a jungle or something like that. Well, the background just loops, so it looks like it's changing, but if you pay really close attention, it'll just loop back and you'll see the start over and over again. And this is another way of doing a quick style of animation, and this is how the early episodes were. Some of the newer ones, they got away from that and they don't really have that static background. But one of the cool things they can do is he's underwater, so you know you don't really need the background. They do like the ocean with the flowers and everything like that, just to kind of give it color and variety in the back, which works out really well in SpongeBob. The walking animations, of course, you can just see it progress. Like, you should watch Help Wanted, which was one of the first episodes. I believe it was the first episode. So you should watch it and then watch some of the newer episodes, and you'll just see how much has progressed. And even the walking animation, like, they did kind of that stereotypical moving animation if you're doing 2D, and you can't really see the legs move. You just see the legs at the first and the stop, and then it blurs up real fast. And that's how it was when they moved, especially Mr. Krabs, who has little legs and everything. And now you can actually see the legs moving throughout, as not only technology has improved, but they've gotten more funding. They show how awesome the show is. There's a fly in here, so don't pay that no mind. It's spring, so they're everywhere right now, and they're driving me crazy. But anyway, back to SpongeBob. It changes throughout that, and it is a noticeable change, but it doesn't take away from it, and you can still enjoy the early ones just as the later ones. You can see how they kind of were experimenting with different shades of the characters. They were experimenting with their shape has stayed the same. I know in some animation the earlier shapes will kind of be different than the later ones. In this one, they've pretty much stayed the same. I mean, it's kind of hard to mess up a square, or, you know, Patrick Star's the starfish. But mostly the colors have changed a little bit. And then, you know, to just jump right into the voice acting has really almost stayed the same. Of course, as the actors get more comfortable with the character, you'll see their voice change a little bit, because it comes like second nature to them. So in the beginning, they were trying to like make the character, I guess you could say, they were trying to put a voice into this just barren item, or, you know, just this blank slate. And as they've done it now for, you know, 20 years now, they can do it pretty much on command, just because they're so used to it. They have some greats in here. Of course, Roger Bumpus as Squidward. You know, if you've ever seen Squidward, he has that real nasally voice and just kind of like doesn't care about anyone. He's the best, you know, he believes he should be somewhere else. And Roger does a good job of doing Squidward, I guess you could say. He really puts his all into that voice, that nasally voice, because Squidward has this big nose. It's really funny. Carolyn Lawrence does Sandy, and she kind of gets this, because Sandy's from Texas, a squirrel from Texas, she kind of gets this drawl on it, which is kind of funny. And, you know, she just speaks kind of really fast, you know, kind of like a squirrel would and everything. And just the character is amazing as Sandy. And then Mr. Lawrence, he's really cool. He plays Plankton, so who's kind of like the enemy or the antagonist of SpongeBob. So he has this real kind of like deep raspy voice, and as you know, Plankton's small, so he's a little character like this, but he has this really deep awesome voice, and Mr. Lawrence does a wonderful job of that. Then you have Bill Fagerbach, who plays Patrick, who is not the brightest character, but he has this deep kind of baritone voice, and he kind of makes him, you know, not dumb, but he is dumb, so it kind of like gives this dumb voice, you know. I guess that makes sense, but he does a good job of explaining, and it comes across that the character's not necessarily the brightest, you know, so that's pretty cool. And then you have Clancy Brown as Mr. Krabs. He kind of got this pirate voice, you know, because he's kind of this older, like, sailor guy, so he kind of has this pirate voice. He kind of has like this piratey laugh. I've said pirate like 6 times, so, and that comes across really good. He does the best. And then you have the great Tom Kenny playing SpongeBob and several characters throughout, and all these characters actually do play several characters throughout, not just Tom Kenny, but of course Tom Kenny's definitely one of the top voice actors of all time, and he's playing the great SpongeBob, and he can't do no wrong really, because it's just a wonderful voice. He puts life into this character that's so great. So I know I've been rambling a lot, but this show is wonderful. I would highly recommend, if you haven't seen it, where have you been? But I know to a lot of people the voice can like get on your nerves, especially SpongeBob's laugh. But when you come to it, that's kind of the point, is he's just this energetic ball of fun, that he's a kid that doesn't really see things like normal people would. Like, he doesn't see it as like, oh, I gotta go to work. He doesn't see it as, oh, I gotta pay bills. He just sees it as fun, and he enjoys it and loves it. And he's kind of like this kid side that we all have, but he just doesn't have the adult side. He just is kid. So it's awesome. It's wonderful. I'm definitely gonna say collector's edition on this one. If you don't have any of the SpongeBob seasons, I would suggest going out and buying all of them. Even me, I have one here, the first 100 episodes of SpongeBob. It's awesome. It's wonderful. It's definitely a good investment. It's something you're going to enjoy watching over and over again. Even if you've seen the same episode five times, you can quote it. It's still wonderful. So it pretty much wraps up. Again, it's so sad that Steven Hillenburg didn't get to see this, but his creation will live on, and all of us, and hopefully our kids and their kids after them, it'll, you know, just be an icon forever, really. And I really hope it does that. It's an amazing show. Make sure you watch it. Leave a comment down below what you think of it. Can you believe that it's been 20 years since SpongeBob's created? That's insane. Also, leave a comment while you're down there of what you would like to see me review next. And make sure you hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. And make sure you hit subscribe and ring that little bell so you don't miss any issues of Bob's Bulletins. Until next time, Bob out.